When I was around 12, something happened that still makes me uneasy to this day. And the creepiest part is, I wasn't the only one who saw it. One evening, I was in my parents' bedroom chatting with my dad about something random. My mom was supposed to be in the walk-in closet. The light was off, but we could both see her shape moving around, folding clothes on the lower shelf. In the middle of our conversation, my dad called out to her, just a normal question, but she didn't respond. He tried again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. After the third or fourth time, he started to sound annoyed and actually raised his voice. I remember standing up and walking toward the closet to see what was going on. And that's when I heard footsteps coming down the hall. My mom suddenly appeared in the doorway. Wrapped in a towel, hair still up in her usual bun, looking confused. She asked why Dad was yelling for her. For a moment, none of us said anything. I turned slowly back toward the closet, and it was empty. Completely empty. Whatever we'd been seeing a few seconds earlier wasn't my mom. But it had her exact shape, same height, even that same bun she always wore. If it had just been me, I would have thought I imagined it. But my dad saw it too. That's what still sends chills down my spine. When my older brother was little, he used to talk about this friend he played with all the time. My parents thought it was just one of those imaginary playmates kids make up. But sometimes, things he said really unsettled us. There were moments he'd suddenly yell, "Stop bothering me," or "I don't want to go play right now," out of nowhere. My mom would ask him what was wrong, and he'd say, "He won't leave me alone." At first, she laughed it off, thinking it was just a phase. But then one night, just a day after his birthday, something happened that made her question everything. He still had a few balloons left from the party, floating around the living room. It was late, around 10 or 11 at night, when my mom heard 2 loud pops. She walked out to check, and my brother was standing there frozen, pale as a ghost. She asked, "Did you pop those balloons?" He shook his head and whispered, "No," he did, and pointed toward the corner of the room, where no one was standing. That's when she noticed a kitchen knife lying next to the deflated balloons. There was no way my brother could have reached it on his own. It had been up on the counter. My mom didn't wait to think twice. She yelled into the empty air, "Whoever you are, get out of my house." Then she turned to my brother and asked softly, "Is he gone?" He nodded, looking relieved. "Yeah," he said. "He left." "Thank you, Mom." About 15 minutes later, some of our cousins came over. As soon as they stepped inside, one of them froze. He swore he saw a woman standing outside the front door, dressed all in white, long hair hanging over her face. When they mentioned it, my brother turned toward the door and said quietly, "That's his mom." Before anyone could react, he added, "She's mad." My mom shouted again, "Leave this house. You're not welcome here." Then she asked my brother, "Is she still there?" He looked for a moment, then said, "No, they're gone." He's 19 now, and sometimes he still says he catches a glimpse of him in the mirror. I must have been around 7 or 8 when this happened. My best friend and I used to spend most of our time in our basement. It was like our secret hideout. We'd play down there for hours. The basement had this small, old storage room under the stairs, and for as long as I can remember, we both swore we'd heard strange noises coming from inside it. It always creeped us out, but we tried to ignore it. One afternoon, it was just the 2 of us at home. We decided to hang out in the basement as usual. Everything felt fine at first, until that sound came again. This low, muffled voice that honestly sounded like a man whispering. We froze. The whole basement suddenly felt colder, quieter. After a few minutes, we tried to convince ourselves it was nothing. We worked up enough courage to open the little door under the stairs. The light flickered when we turned it on, but the space was completely empty. We laughed it off and went back to playing, pretending we weren't scared out of our minds. Then we heard it again. This time it was clearer, almost like someone speaking, but we couldn't make out the words. My friend looked at me and said we should try recording it. So, I grabbed my tablet, turned on the camera, and set it up facing the storage door. We switched on the light inside, shut the door, and bolted upstairs, too scared to stay anywhere near it. We let the recording run for a few minutes before finally forcing ourselves to go back down. My hands were shaking when I stopped the video. We sat together and played it back. At first, it was completely normal. You could see us setting the camera, hear our footsteps leaving, everything. But about 15 seconds after we ran upstairs, the screen just turned pitch black. No light, no flicker, just total darkness. It stayed that way for nearly the whole recording, until the moment we came back down. As soon as our footsteps echoed on the stairs again, the image suddenly returned to normal. The weirdest part is that the light inside the storage room never went out, and there was nothing in front of the camera that could have blocked it. To this day, I have no idea what happened down there, but every time I think about that basement, I still get chills. This happened about 2 or 3 years ago. I remember it clearly because I was home alone that night while my parents were out shopping for gifts. Our house sat near a quiet wooded area, and it was usually peaceful until that night. I had just let my dog out into the yard for a few minutes, but when I went to call him back in, he started barking like crazy. I glanced out the window and froze. Something gray, a shape, a person maybe, darted across the edge of our yard and disappeared behind the fence. I told myself I was just tired, maybe seeing things in the dark, and tried to shake it off. A few days later, though, something even weirder happened. I was sitting in my room when I heard a light tapping on my window. At first, I thought one of my friends was trying to mess with me. I peeked outside, nothing. Just darkness. To be sure, I actually opened the window and leaned out to check. The moment I did, I heard a soft whistle, like someone calling for attention from far away. My stomach dropped, and I slammed the window shut immediately. About 2 weeks after that, my friend and I decided to explore an old abandoned house on the edge of town. We had to climb through a broken window since every door was jammed shut. The air inside was heavy and smelled awful, like something rotten. We followed the stench to a corner where a large black garbage bag was lying on the floor. Whatever was inside, it was clearly decomposing. I was hoping it was just spoiled food or maybe a dead animal, but before we could open it, that same exact whistle echoed through the house. We panicked and hid under a dusty old table, barely breathing. After what felt like forever, maybe 15 minutes, we heard footsteps. Slow, heavy ones coming from the upper floor. Then something started running down the stairs. When I dared to peek, my blood ran cold. There was a figure, completely wrapped in gray duct tape from head to toe, standing motionless at the bottom of the staircase. It didn't move for what felt like 2 whole minutes. Then, without a word, it turned around and walked back upstairs. We waited another moment, then decided to make a run for it. But before leaving, we couldn't ignore that horrible smell anymore. My friend pulled out a pocket knife, slit open the black bag, and we both shocked. Inside were what looked like at least 20 human fingers, pale and stiff. We bolted out of there, called the police, and led them back to the house a while later. But when they checked the same spot, the bag was gone. Instead, there was a glass jar filled with blood like liquid sitting right where it had been. They couldn't explain it. Neither could we. And after that night, nothing like that ever happened again. But I still can't get that whistle out of my head. This happened about 12 years ago, back when I was still in high school and living with my parents. They had just bought a small apartment from one of my mom's friends. The woman who'd owned it before, an elderly lady, had passed away peacefully there not long before we moved in. Everyone said she'd been kind and polite, but also a little eccentric. Apparently, she had a fascination with old folk rituals and bits of harmless witchcraft. Nothing dark, just little charms and spells she treated like hobbies. When we moved in, a lot of her furniture and decorations were still there. My parents decided to keep most of it. The place was already cozy, so why not? For the first few months, everything was completely normal. Then, small things started happening that made us think maybe we weren't the only ones living there. But it wasn't what you'd expect. No flickering lights or ghostly footsteps. What we started noticing were twist ties. Yeah, those little wire ties you get on bags of bread or produce. They would just appear, out of nowhere. Sometimes on the coffee table, sometimes wrapped around a lamp cord, sometimes tucked into a drawer that none of us remembered opening. Once, I left the living room to grab a drink, and when I came back, a red twist tie was sitting right in the middle of the couch cushion I'd just been sitting on. Another time, I found one twisted neatly around my toothbrush handle. Each one was a different color, shape, or size, almost like they were placed intentionally, waiting for us to find them. There were only 3 of us in the apartment, so at first we all blamed each other for pulling some weird prank. But after a while, we realized no one was lying. Each of us had our own moment, with the twist ties that couldn't be explained. It got to the point where it stopped feeling creepy and became oddly familiar, like a strange inside joke with whatever was behind it. We even gave our unseen visitor a nickname, the Twisty Tie Lady. I started keeping them in my nightstand drawer, just to see how many I'd end up with. I never found any meaning behind them, either. I even looked online once to see if twist ties meant anything in witchcraft, but nothing came up. A few years later, after we'd moved out, my mom's friend told her something that made it all click. The woman who'd lived there before used to collect twist ties with her daughter. They had this funny little thing between them where they'd save every single one, convinced they'd come in handy someday. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. But I like to think she was just saying hello in her own way. That apartment building doesn't exist anymore. It was destroyed in a flood a few years after we left. But every time I see a twist tie lying around, I can't help but smile. It's a small, quiet reminder that maybe some people never really leave the places they loved.